question, which was one of our common ground findings was that KM roles could be mapped to any of the 4 generic types of roles. And I think we've heard all 4 of those just now. Strategic or the CXX level, KM specialized, business aligned, and universal. So given your knowledge and experience, would you say that all of these levels are necessary to apply, or why not?
I think at the strategic level, as I was saying before, you need at least one overall leader, and what you call them can be anything: KM program leader, chief knowledge officer, whatever term works in your organization. But it can be at the overall level of the organization, or it can be at an individual business unit or individual department or whatever. And then you can scale it as to have as few or as many of them as is possible. So someone that's overall knowledge management program leader would be at that strategic level. The second one, the specialized KM, I think that following on the 3-legged stool that Dean mentioned, from my experience, I like breaking down projects into the people, process, technology categories. Other people have other categories that they like. They add to that. They have 4. Or, it doesn't really matter, but pick whatever grouping makes sense, and then divide your projects that way. So when I set up a program at HP, we did it that way. One person was in charge of people, one in charge of process, one in charge of technology, and that gave us some kind of logic to where we did things. You certainly could put it, sometimes things overlap and they could go into one or the other, but you pick some kind of a unifying principle and use that. And then if you have a larger group, then you just scale it under that. If you have multiple people projects, then have the people overall leader lead them and go down as deep as you want. Or if you have a very small team, have one person doing all of those. But or find some way to organize it. Right now, the group I'm in doesn't organize that way, and it's sometimes hard for people to figure out, well, why are you in that team versus that team, because they don't have any kind of tag that goes with it. You know, I'm a team lead, and I have some people working for me. I think it's better to identify the team and what its mission is or what its organizing principle is. So have as few or as many as you can afford, but have those be your project leaders, and those are the people that are actually responsible for the work that you're doing. And then I found it useful to have something which assists your people in knowledge. We used to call them knowledge advisors at HP. We have something like that at Deloitte that we call the business support people. You can call them a lot of different things. When I wrote about it, I called it knowledge assistants. But somebody whose job it is to help the people out there understand what's available, how to do things, where to find things. Don't assume that everyone will know. Not everybody is as good as everybody else when it comes to searching. And so provide assistance for that. And I always found it a nice thing to say to someone if they complained that your system's too hard to use, I can't find anything in it. Rather than trying to explain to them why they were wrong, it was easier to say, we've got someone to help you. So call them and they will help you. And so put in some level of that, whether that's one person or that's many people, whatever. Something that's there to help people who you can use for training, awareness, communications, answering questions. So that would be the second level. The business line level is really important. And that's, I think we've heard several people mention that. That's, to me, a virtual team. That's not a direct report usually in your organization, but it's somebody that you get assigned to every business that you're working with, who emerges and is a champion within that business. And so you form a virtual team and they join your virtual team, but you don't directly manage them or pay for them. You get the businesses and the functions and the geographies and whatever other organization structures you have to say, will you assign someone to be your KM leader or your KM champion, and then join us in this effort as part of an extended team. And when we get to the universal, when I thought about that, I realized what you want there is roles that need to be out there. They may not be formal roles, but they're things like community leaders, or we sometimes assign what we call knowledge champions to projects to help pull the content out of a project, make sure that it's submitted into a repository. There can be people that work to facilitate the flow of knowledge and elicit knowledge. You know, there are lots of different roles, and they would vary by organization, but there's some roles that you can identify that you assign to your work unit, whether that's the project or the engagement or the community. And you want to identify those and have ways of helping to train people to do that and form communities for them to join together and nurture that role. So those are the things that I see. If you put those all together, you have some formal team structures with solid lines, you have some dotted lines and extended virtual teams, and then you have some communities and networks that bring all of it.
Stan?
Just real quick, just for clarification, Jim had talked about above the flow and in the flow.
In the flow.
Okay. It would be helpful when you are talking about the roles, if you'll identify, are we talking above the flow or in the flow? I mean, I think I know, but rather than assume that I know, I think it would be helpful. If, it makes sense, because the latter part that you were talking about, Stan, was in the flow, right?
Yes, I think that the ones when I said the solid line, the formal team, that's the above the flow part. And I think everything else is in the flow. The extended team, the communities, the networks. There are people you try to treat them like they're all part of your same team, but you realize that they're not. And the better job you do of leading them as a community and pulling the people from in the flow in, the better off I think you end up.
Okay, and then just real quick, I won't take up too much more time. In the flow is where this idea comes from that you really, everybody ought to be the, now I profess that because I'd rather teach someone to fish than to give them the fish. So you really want to jump down in the flow to do the work, and then at times you need to come above the flow so you can do your strategies and planning and budgeting and all of that. Then you're going to get back down in the flow. So that's all.
Well, that's where I was going, Stan, because I'm kind of fascinated by the 4 categories that we've come up with in the previous 7 webinars. Because actually, you know, I did my little quick and dirty thing, and I thought, well, okay, the universal is the everybody thing, and it's actually a very good entry point into the whole business of knowledge management, knowledge services. Then I stopped, I thought, well, wait a minute, though, how does that lead into knowledge strategy development and sort of higher level things? So Stan, what I'm going to challenge you with maybe, let's play a little bit with, I mean, we're very much in this room, obviously trying to get away from hierarchy. And yet, when I saw those 4 categories, I thought, well, I think I'm seeing, especially when we get to business related as opposed to one of the others, I'm seeing kind of a hierarchy falling into place here. So I'm just trying to toss that out. Let's play with that a little bit. Stan, any reaction, any comment about that?
Yeah, I think there's a hierarchy, but it's a small hierarchy.
Okay.
There's a leader, and there's some project leaders, maybe some knowledge assistants, and that's the end of the hierarchy.
Okay.
And then the rest of it is all brought in as your network. And to me, that's not a hierarchy. That's my evangelism, recruiting them as members.
Well said. Hierarchy at first to begin with, but then it evolves into, pulls into